Please give a hand to HN and Ismail. So, a short introduction about our panelists. So, HN is the CEO of PowerHub, a leading asset management solution provider. HN has experience on over 4 gigawatts of wind and solar projects in Americas, in Europe and Asia, so basically covering all the continents, and is actively participating in the growth of the sector. He is holding also an MBA from INSEAD. Ismail has worked in solar photovoltaics sector since '98. He has joined Lightsource operations and maintenance team, and he's currently overseeing the implementation of procedures and schedules for both preventative and corrective O&M maintenance plans at Lightsource. So HN, Ismail, warm welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this panel. So we are going to make this panel as interactive as possible, so during the discussion you are free to raise your hand and interact. But I would like to start with my opening question, and it's interesting also to hear the different perspectives of the plant owner and the service provider. So, since we are going to speak about the future of monitoring and data management systems, we need to understand what are the current challenges that we are facing at the moment, and what are those things that we want to change in the future. So my question to both of you, HN and Ismail, would be, what do you think, in your opinion, what are the key challenges, let's say 3 challenges that you face as a plant owner and as a service provider?
Well, thank you very much, Susan. I think that it's all about the way to convert a huge amount of data in really useful information to operate the plant, to analyze what's the status of the plant. So, not always a huge amount of data means that we have a good quality data. So there's a relationship between the amount of data and the quality of the data. There's a lot about the flexibility from the systems to be adapted to the particularities of each one of the sites. And there's a lot about the flexibility to include new systems in the platform. So that's something that should be easy. One of our concerns, the challenge is to have really reliable alarms, alarms that works with a clear hierarchy, because nobody wants to have 10 alarms for the same issue. If we have an issue, a big issue in one inverter, then we don't need to receive a lot of alarms for all the systems behind the inverter. Or, even worse, we don't want to have 10 alarms, 10 false alarms, and in between of them, one real alarm. So that's everything about flexibility and reliability, I think.
And I think an important topic that's gone through throughout the conference so far is about transparency as well. Having actual visibility into what's going on in the plant, and also having that interlaid with, I think there's hard information, which is performance information, financial information. And as an asset management software provider, we're looking at also bringing in the soft data component. So it's bringing the whole performance of the plant from both a soft side and a hard data together, which also becomes a big challenge in providing reliable data, as Ismail was mentioning, and basically quality data as well. A lot of instances where we have holes in data, how do you plug those holes in the data? Is it a data logger issue? Is it an inverter issue? Those become very, very important questions to be able to answer, to have a reliable data set at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is very interesting. Do you have just an example of these points that you mentioned that would be interesting to share?
I think it's Ismail's slide, but so.
That's for Ismail.
That one is more about the human factor. It's more about how it's an important challenge. We cannot forget that behind the screen, what we have is a person, is someone or a group of people. It's a monitoring operator or a performance analyst taking care of all the data, checking alarms, verifying the alarms, doing an assessment. So depending on how good the data are, the data that we are receiving, the way they are showing, and the assessment that we are going to do, we can save a lot of time, we can organize our assets in a better way, we can, let's say, we can optimize our resources. So avoiding false alarms, or just verifying that an alarm is a communication alarms, but not a production alarm. So that's the way to optimize the resources. So I have some examples we can go if you want.
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Now, so that's a point when sometimes it's difficult for a system because we see the red line is the irradiance and the blue line is the production. And we can see how half of the day there's a big difference between both of them, which means that the PR is really bad. So what's the original cause for that? Is that the inverter was not working, especially when are we going to realize about that? Is that someone has changed the parameters, or the inverter is completely wrong with the MPPT tracker? So, well, during the monitoring of the system, then we realized that we have that day the same problem in the whole region. So it's not only a site, it's all the plants in the same area. So if we go to the next presentation, we see clearly that the reason was the snow. No need to create a request for the manufacturer of the inverters asking that the parameters are wrong or something, because it was just something natural, a temporary situation that disappeared, in this case at 2 p.m. So these kinds of things are
that could be connected with the human factor, of
exactly.
course. Yes, Adrian, you have a
I guess the snow is a great example. We have a client who was actually selling some plants basically this spring and had problems with production in February. And as we're based in Canada, snow can become a big factor. But in this case, basically the buyer wanted to discount the valuation of the plant on a go-forward basis, basically expecting that snow would be there every February. But in this case, 4 days out of the month of February, there was no production because of a local disconnect for unplanned maintenance. So the ability to basically track those events, which are not necessarily technical events, but are events nevertheless that need to be logged and monitored and cross-referenced, really could have actually, in this case, enhanced the value of the plant upon sale.
Yes, yes, indeed. And by the way, just a curious question, since we are talking about the human factor, do you think also this has to do about a bit about the culture? Because we all know that some cultures are more service-oriented, some cultures are not. So what do you think? What is your experience with that? Do you think this is cultural specific, the human factor?
Well, no, I think it's not cultural specific. It's just about the way to organize the whole structure. It's just it's just the way we are in contact with the field service engineers. So it's not only to detect the thing and then not to create a false alarms or give the right priority to the issue. It's a lot about the way we are communicating what we can see from the monitoring system to the field engineers on the site. It's about giving the right information, make them informed about how the different actions they are performing on the site, what is what we can see from the remote monitoring system. And yeah, it's about we want to have everything integrated, not as different systems where maybe a person in a different country is just checking line after line after line, and raising tickets, because some of these tickets are not going to have the right priority if they are not issued by a person with the right knowledge of the whole environment of the plant, of the systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every operator is different. Every asset manager has a different bias, I guess. But through structured processes and how to respond to an issue, if this, then that type of approaches, which can standardize in organizations, processes can really help limit those biases, and having proper systems in place, obviously, as well.
And when looking in the future, do you think that the human factor will still remain important, or you consider that automation would cover this part? Very optimistic question, of course.
It's going to be important all the time. The point is, the better the system, the more friendly it is, the more easy to understand. What is going to be reduced is the ratio of operators or performance analysts per number of megawatts. So the better the system, the less the resources that we need to manage them. But at the end, of course, there will be someone there.
Do you still think that
Yeah.
it will remain important?
I don't believe it could be completely automatic or just.
Yeah?
I guess as a software provider, I believe that technology can solve a lot of issues, but I think it's about productivity. I think, as Ismail is bringing it up, you'll never take the human factor completely out of the equation, but it'll allow people to focus on what's important. Rather than focusing on 45 alarms that come up or 73 issues to manage, there are going to be 3. And then people are going to have actionable intel on which to actually take decisions, rather than sifting through the data to go through information to then say, oh, I then need to make a decision. So I think technology can really assist people in bringing, I think Christophe showed that very easily as a preventive maintenance planning, all those type of things. Good data, good transparency into asset performance can bring basically more efficiency through the process.
So it will assist, technology will assist, but will not completely take over.
Yeah, I think we're not at the stage of robots managing plants just yet.
Okay, so then going to my next question, in your opinion, what is needed to increase the accuracy and transparency into the plant performance?
Well, I think there's a lot of people at the moment looking for better instruments accuracy, and looking for a lot of small parameters like the non-stability, spectral selectivity, a lot of small parameters affecting the final accuracy, especially with the sensors. And that's important, of course, but there's a lot of things more to do to improve the accuracy of the plants, and it's about the availability of the systems. Even from the installation perspective, from the hardware point of view, we need to improve the quality of the systems we are using. And not only speaking about data loggers or controllers, I'm talking about cables and being sure that the signal from the different devices is going to be the right one. So if there needs to be an amplifier, we need to be sure that it's there and the signal is properly configured in the data logger. So there's a lot of points to be sure that they are working fine, apart of just increase the accuracy of the instruments. So there's about that, and to improve transparency, as Tian said before, it's about the way to fill the gaps of the data when we have a field. So it's not only the monitoring system, it's the monitoring system must be flexible enough to adapt to our these particularities, like, for example, the contractual particularities, to exclude some of the downtime times. So if we need to fill up a period of time where we don't have data or we lost the irradiance data for any reason, we have to see who was the responsible and then include that in the calculation process. And at the end, that would be transparent for the client to see, look, this is the final value of the PR, of the availability, of the performance, and it's based in all of that. So something easy to understand by all the parts, and to avoid this kind of suspicious, PR is always good. Well, if the plant is working good, PR is good. If it's not good, there will be a reason, and that should be perfectly
I guess the standardization of data as well. I think lots of plants with different monitoring systems, different approaches, it's very hard to kind of bring a holistic view together of what's really going on. And I think there's pros and cons in having multiple systems or a unique system and so on, but pulling the data together into a coherent dashboard or just a coherent vision, especially when you communicate outwards to other stakeholders on the project, can become challenging, I guess. And that's one thing that on reliability, accuracy, transparency is important. And also with multiple points of equipment, you also have errors everywhere. So your tolerances for errors on all your sensors can add up as well. So that's also something always to take care of. If you're trying to calculate a PR and you have an error at the pyranometer level, at the inverter level, and so on, at the data logger, and you have a 1% PR tolerance that you want to get to, you have to see what kind of errors or basically tolerances you have on every single piece of equipment to make sure that you can actually meet your contractual targets through accurate measurements.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking now at the audience to see if anybody else has a different experience with increasing the accuracy and transparency into the plant performance, or everybody agrees with our panelists. We have one question here. Could we pass the microphone?
Hi, we see paranometers installed on solar farms, and each year there seem to be more and more paranometers installed. Yet the historical plants have got the higher tariffs and the lowest quality of data. How many paranometers would you say are required to accurately monitor a plant?
To monitor the plants, finally, what we are monitoring is the PR and availability. So at the end, there are some difficulties coming from the contracts because the PR is not the same. The formula to calculate the PR is not the same all over the contracts that we are managing at the moment. So we need to be as well flexible enough to modify the way we are calculating this PR from the data input that we have at the moment. And we need to be clear about the way to calculate the availability. So what kind of downtimes are going to be included in the calculation of the availability? What kind of downtimes are going to be excluded? And well, that's about the contractual obligations, but systems, in my opinion, should be flexible enough to be able to add all of these little issues in order to have the proper report, the proper information from the monitoring systems.
But how many pieces of hardware do you think are required?
Sorry?
How many pieces of hardware do you think are required on a plant?
On the plant?
Yeah. So
well,
how many?
It's not necessary. I mean, it's about the structure of the monitoring system, but of course, all the sensors, all the transformers, data transformers, all the data loggers, and the control operator of the plant. So we have a lot of different systems on the portfolio with a lot of different devices, and one of the challenges is that's about the retrofitting. We are talking about that, but one of the challenges is how to make it easier in order to integrate all of these different systems with a lot of different devices. Some of them are very basic systems with even poor information and just partial information from some of the devices. Of course, if we have these kind of systems, it is quite easy to justify the retrofitting, because for our retrofitting, it's going to be associated an extra cost. Who's going to pay this extra cost? So, well, if it's easy to justify that the plant is going to be improved, and then we're going to reduce the detection times, and it's going to suppose a shorter time of downtime, then it's easy to justify to the original investor that it's worth to make an extra expense in order to improve the communication system and integrate it, if it's possible, in the global monitoring system. But sometimes, if the system is good but it's difficult to integrate it in the global monitoring platform, then the best beneficiary of that process is the operator. In this case, it would be us using the monitoring system, because it's going to make our life easier. We are going to use less time, we are going to optimize our resources, we are going to give a better service, but it's difficult sometimes to argue with the original investor that it's worth to retrofit the system just because we want to have a better access to the information, saving time, So, well, sometimes it would be possible. Sometimes what we need is people able to understand the different systems, even manufacturer monitoring systems, inverters manufacturer systems. It's really interesting to have alternatives. So if one of the systems is failing, we have a backup, we have a different path to check if the inverter is working or is just only not communicating. But yeah, there's a lot of different systems at the moment, and one of the difficulties is how to integrate everything.
Together. We have one more question from Christoph.
I want to say something regarding the number of devices and the number of pyranometers in the plants. The number of pyranometer in plants are mostly driven by banks because they think they're more exact or more detailed than standard sensors. They are, but a normal pyranometer has a tolerance of 2%. Every point or every figure after the comma of a pyranometer is a lie. Anyway, nobody believes it, but it is so. We recommend about 2 pyranometers on tilt level on 10 megawatt. If you've got 20 megawatts, put 4 in. And then 2 handfuls of standard cells. So that's it. Yeah.
You have comments on that?
That's out of my wheelhouse.
Okay, so going back to the retrofits, Ismail told a little bit about his experience, but what is your experience with retrofitting internal systems, HN? Would you tell us a bit more about that?
So we have clients who kind of have different systems they're trying to integrate, and the question often arises, and we're in a fairly young jurisdiction often enough where systems are fairly recent. So the systems are 3-4 years old tops on where we're working right now. Which means that people are saying, oh, do I standardize, don't I? It depends on acquisitions and basically what they really want to achieve. And that's where it becomes a very interesting discussions like, do I need why you want to change? And that's the key driver. Is it for better functionality, as kind of Christoph was mentioning, is it for better reliability, better quality of information, or simply to standardize, to have a unique kind of dashboard standardized across the board. And all these basically have their own set of challenges on how you implement and what you roll out. And really the fundamental question is why people want to retrofit, and that really depends on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. And you had a slide about that, right, HN?
But basically,
yeah, that's covered. You covered already everything. Ismail, do you have any addition about that?
No, it's okay. I mean, it's of course one of the main advantages is just to have only one screen with all the portfolio. When you can have a clear view of what is happening all over, and then main alarms are shown in this screen. And if you need more detail, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. So that.
Okay, looking again to the audience, I would like to hear also your experience with retrofitting internal systems, internal and monitoring systems. So we already have the first question in the first row. Please pass them. You already have the microphone. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll go back a step rather than answering yours about sharing experience.
Okay.
What I've been listening to, because it sounds very wasteful, right? A lot of people have built assets, right? The EPC has put in equipment, and then O&M contractors come, specialized ones, and they say, okay, well, I have to retrofit things. So you're actually throwing away something that somebody's put in before and adding new equipment. So I'm trying to get in my head over the last 2 days, what is the specification that should have been put in at the beginning, right, for data logging and data capture? And it sounds to me that everybody has a different solution in terms of how to present the data, but the common element is the data logger. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that you want a universal data logger, one that has some sort of FTP push or something that pushes the data out to any system, because you can buy different softwares. I think you say you want 1 minute resolution, right? It's not good enough to have 15 minute or half hour or 1 hour. It's got to be 1 minute. You have to have spare channels, because people then might want to add connections to the temperature of the transformer oil, or various things that maybe have been forgotten. So you need the spare channels. It sounds also like you have to have string level monitoring. That was said yesterday. Are there other common elements? Because if you had this common data logger, it sounds like then it doesn't matter who's doing your O&M, because all of their solutions will plug into this data logger, capture the data, and people have special algorithms that they've developed to look for problems. But it's really important, fundamental, to start with capturing the basic data. I mean, did I understand correctly what people have been saying over the last few days?
Well, I think this is basically the way we are working. So, but we are giving service mostly to our own portfolio in LightSource. So it means when we are developing the plans, all of them are built according to our specifications. So we are using the same data logger for all of them, the same control system. It's really easy to integrate. There's another fact, is that the technology is advancing, so at some point you decide to change for a better one or any other aspect. But the point is, in the portfolio there are also as well some plants that you are acquiring. Some of them are older than the others, and you cannot choose the system that is installed at the moment. And then is when you start this process to make the assessment of the system on site and see if you can add it as it is to your monitoring system. What kind of extra resources are you going to need just to monitor it with the same level of quality that you are giving for the other ones? Maybe if it's a different system and you need twice or 3 times to check the same issues that you are checking with the global one, then you need another resource just for that. And of course, if the plan acquiring it's old and the data quality are poor or just partial one, you cannot have access to all of the devices that you would like to have, then it's when you have to prepare a proposal to retrofit the system.
I think you bring a great point. I think there's so many different platforms with different APIs to pull data from so many different sources. Having a standardized, I'm going to say, data logger who probably needs also to monitor, I guess, on the AC side a little bit for plant stability and other points, and have lots of room. I think different users want different data points ultimately. So I think a flexibility of a great data logger that would be software agnostic, that can push to multiple servers and whatnot, that would be fantastic. A lot of people have proprietary technology and login, but from what I understand, the data loggers on site are pretty standard to some extent. It's about the sensors and the algorithms, as you mentioned. So maybe there's a business opportunity there for and some standardization to see on a go-forward basis for especially communication protocols and basically the way that the layout of the data and so on. That would probably help basically fill in holes, but I guess. Why it's not done, it's basically different alignments, right? The EPC is low cost. I think Christoph had a great slide on that. And he probably has a lot more to say on it too.
We have one more question. First row.
I think the answer to that is at the owner of the parks, because if you want to buy a park, write in your proposal or your call for tender what you'd like to have. And if you'd like to have third-tier Chinese modules, you will get them. And if you write you want to have this kind of data in this resolution, in this set of data with these protocols, you will get this. But most of the investors don't care. End of story.
Do we have an investor on the audience? Okay, so any more questions on this?
Now, we've all lived through inherited plants, I would say, with inherited monitoring systems. Do you see a tendency in the market that a supplier may look into a special retrofit system, maybe not hardwired, but Bluetooth-based or however you call it? Now, that might be a nightmare in terms of outages of signals. But on the other hand, there seems to be a challenge with retrofitting of systems and the related cost. So do you see a tendency in that, in terms of not hardwired but Bluetooth-based or something like that?
I think there's both hardware and software based that you can probably do to some extent. We know a few companies who are trying innovative, low-cost approaches to data transmission, data monitoring on a variety of, I'm going to say, smaller scale sensors through RF or through other technologies. Even current measurement. Basically, we have a little company that I just met last week, actually, in Toronto, who on a smaller scale plant, so rooftops especially, can basically monitor just the currents through one device and basically infer from their different current signature what equipment is performing at what perspective. So I think there is going to be an evolution on basically the type of monitoring that we're going to see. And I think it's gonna change from a cost basis, from a reliability basis, and so on. That's what I've seen. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think, and as Christos saw before, when you face a difficult situation like this one that you are planting now, the right solution is the most expensive one.
Okay, so going to my next question. So now imagine this is 2020, 5 years from now. How will the future platforms look like? What are the 3 top trends that you see in the future platforms?
I think that's very, very interesting. What's coming in the future, and from a technology standpoint, I think we're just on the cusp of integrating a lot of more information and moving from data to information overall. So I think we'll have a broader integration between platforms, between, I'm going to say, the monitoring systems, the asset management systems, the CRMs, accounting systems. So you'll have basically best in breed systems who are all going to talk to each other in very seamless fashion and automate a lot of the tasks that we now consider as routine or necessary, and so on. So I think that's really going to be the integration, the automation of basically either data acquisition, data processing, and basically, as I was kind of mentioning before, it's going to be insights driven. So basically, technology is going to become smart enough to say, hey, we've noticed that you have 3, I'm going to say, rooftop projects in this corner. It didn't make sense to roll a truck when you had 2 out of the 50 down. You now have a 3rd plant that's starting to kind of have a hiccup. Maybe now is the right time to roll the truck. Or maybe now is the right time to kind of think about preventive maintenance as you have kind of the cost competitivity of having in this geographic area or so on. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that evolves, and the notion of virtual benchmarking with a lot more data and a lot more sharing of data. I think there's a lot of organizations who are trying to kind of pool data together to see how can we compare plants that I own versus some plants that I do not own to kind of have good virtual benchmarking. So I think we're going to see an evolution where you're going to have a lot more information at your fingertips, and that's going to basically the data basically analyst or whatnot is going to be able to make decisions rather than sift through data. And basically that's going to be fully customized for that user in that role in that organization. Because if there's one thing that's different, everybody has a different vision of the world and how things should be done. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that's really customized for each organization, each site even, or even each user.
Etienne, just one question. How will the Siri for solar look like? I am very interested.
That's basically you can ask, I can see a future where you can ask questions of your system rather than pulling a report. And basically that's basically systems becoming proactive rather than reactive. And that's something real that's happening where you can basically just figure it out as like if this then that. Basically, you can already create rules in a lot of systems, like on an alert basis and whatnot, but really bringing it a step forward and providing you information or choices of courses of action. But obviously, we're a few years away from that, but it's already starting. It was just kind of a catchphrase more than anything.
Indication.
So, in my opinion, it's about the improvement of the platforms to do the different things. I mean, when we are doing monitoring, we are really worried. We are working on the monitoring. We are working on the management of the different preventative and corrective maintenance. We are working on the analysis of all of these data, trends, improving performance, and we are working on the reporting. So I can see most of the monitoring systems are improving themselves a lot, and most of them are giving these capabilities at the moment. Yeah, I think that they will be improving themselves during the next few years. At the moment, the way we are working, for example, is we are using 4 different platforms for these 4 different tasks, and they are linked between them. So we are using monitoring system, we are using a CMMS for the management of the maintenance, and we are using a business intelligence tool for the analysis of performance, and we are using a reporting tool to integrate all of this information in a proper report. And we are talking about 4 different softwares. Yeah, all of them are industrial, professional, and proof experience, but not compulsory. Became from the PV, from the photovoltaic sector, not even from the energy sector. So the CMMS could be an industrial CMMS. What I need from it is to be flexible enough to adapt the system to our necessities. And the same with the reporting tool, and the same with the business intelligence tool.
Okay. And when you look at the evolution of non-traditional and non-technical metrics of performance, how do you see this evolution?
Well, it's just about the transparency. It's just about the, I think, not traditional. At this moment, all the people is using PR as the way to assess how the plant is working, and we have seen in some of the speeches before of the conference that there's a lot of people agree that it's not the best way. It's not the best way, and there's a lot of other factors affecting. So I guess in the future will be more to calculation of the theoretical expected energy produced according to some other factors. But at the moment, maybe it's going to be complicate the system. And we have seen how most of the people want to standardize the way to assess the performance of the plants. Well, I don't know exactly what's going to be in the future about that, but I would like improvements, of course.
I think the interesting thing that we can do is bringing soft data and hard data together. So looking at what's going on the plant with regards to either compliance, legal, or certain constraints that you're working under, and basically bridging that with financial performance and basically actual plant performance all together. That gives you a more comprehensive report card of what's really going on in your plant on basically even an operations basis, a contractual basis, a performance, and a financial basis. And it's about, I guess, building that report card that makes sense for the organization that's ultimately going to say, hey, on these types of plants, the response time of my O&M provider is really lower than the response time of my other O&M providers. Maybe there's something that I could look into. Or my asset manager who's taking care of this portfolio is basically having some issues a lot more than others, and his response time is lower. So there's a lot of things to be done also, if I'm going to say the softer side of data, which is great to kind of see and map out as a plant portfolio or even organizational level. So rolling up KPIs rather than just having them also at the plant level is interesting.
Yeah, and of course it depends of what is exactly what you want to assess. I mean, if it's purely the maintenance of the site, well, PR is going to be affected by a lot of different things. So maybe it would be better just to leave availability. Then even the exclusions would be easier to manage. And I think availability in terms of the assessment of the different maintenance that we have on the plants would be a better way to see if the different companies are doing the job or not.
Okay, thank you very much for the different perspectives. Looking again back to the audience, any other opinions about this or questions that we discussed before? Yes, to the left side, please.
Yes, on opinions, I think I'd just like to add a point to Etienne's slide, but standardization is important. But at the end of the day, you have many different customers, and you have customers that are, or users, I should say, that they want to get different things out of the system. So, for instance, for an O&M contract in certain countries, the technical advisors have gone crazy with their definition of what a PR formula should look like. And so, it's sometimes really hard for people to track whether indeed the contractual obligations in the O&M contract have been respected or not. And so to be able to do that calculation, it's very cumbersome to take the information out of a monitoring system, put it into a spreadsheet and do your calculations. So I would add flexibility to this list so that the user can actually do any kind of calculations with the data. That suits his needs, and that so even if they can run reports, that they have the flexibility to basically do any kind of calculations with the data to suit their needs. And we hear from our clients that sometimes with some monitoring systems that's a problem because they don't allow to do that, and so they spend a lot of time and effort doing those calculations, which I think, coming back to your points, at the end of the day, the system of the future has to be a system where people can spend time looking at the plans, making smart decisions, and not copy and pasting information across different systems.
Thank you very much for the addition. Any more comments? Questions? Okay, then I would like to thank you, Etienne and Ismail, for the insightful discussions, and I hope this was useful for the audience. And yes, and now I would like to invite everyone to have lunch outside in the foyer. The next session will start 1:45, and in the same room. And we have a session about O&M and health and safety in the UK market. And afterwards, we have a presentation about tax restructuring. So please enjoy lunch and networking. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ismail.